Hello and welcome to the JEF Hangout on the Hungarian elections. I'm really happy that we have JEFers from Hungary and Poland and Belgium here to speak with us, and you can engage with us via the links or the hashtags JEF Hangout, so you can ask us questions that we will hopefully going to answer. And now I give the speaking to Leonie, who will moderate the discussion.
Oh, thank you, Katarina. Well, first of all, thank you to JEF Germany to organizing this hangout. I mean, it's very timely, so I'm pretty pleased, and I hope many JEFers are joining. So this time we have Marc Soignet, who is a member of JEF Brussels, but who is Hungarian, and Michal, Jarski, the president of JEF Poland, joining us.
Hey.
Precisely. Welcome. And thank you also for your time. I think we have a lot of questions, and if you want to participate in the debate, as Katarina said, do join us. I mean, she's following especially social media for us. We have a hashtag called #JEF Hangout, and we will check this and try to include it. Tonight's topic is the Hungarian elections, which took place on Sunday. And the Hungarian people basically have elected, well, a new government, a new parliament for the period or for a mandate of 4 new years. During the 2 previous governments under Viktor Orban, the prime minister, we already were witnesses to the deterioration of democracy and rule of law. I remember back when I joined JEF in 2010, the introduction of the media law, for instance, the judicial reform. 2012, we saw the introduction of a new constitution, which was also not that unproblematic. And last year, I think this is also something that is in the back of the minds of many JEFers. There was a possible closure of the Central European University as part of the package on, I think it was funding. Another big topic, basically, that we see constantly is the draft law on funding of NGOs, Soros, etc. So it is a very, very critical situation, but also, you know, possibly influential for the rest of Europe, for the rest of us. The Commission has answered to some degree, but I think this is up to us also to discuss, and this is why I'm very pleased that we have this evening tonight. Well, I should mention, so for instance, today also came the news that one of the last remaining newspapers that were sort of in the opposition to the government announced that they were closing immediately. So this is seems to be an election with a high, well, high impact, let's say. So why don't we start with Marc? You've been there. You told us just in the pre-discussions that you visited Budapest to go vote. Even though the victory of Orban was expected, can you explain us, you know, how do you feel about the elections, and how do you feel about, you know, so many Hungarians actually being seduced to vote for his populist premises, but also to vote, well, to vote off democracy in a democratic way?
Yes. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I'm a half Hungarian, and I voted in these elections. So I was in Budapest during the weekend, but of course I've been following very closely everything that's been happening in the last month. It was a really, really, in a way, exciting time because, yeah, when you have a whole part of the country that is trying to find a way to make a campaign in an atmosphere which is a really difficult one. I mean, the state propaganda on migration. You have to know that there's virtually no migratory pressure on Hungary, and even if there were some migrants who wanted to stay in Hungary at the beginning, they definitely don't want that now anymore. And so, yeah, you have a system of rules which makes it extremely difficult for any other party than Fidesz to win. So yes, it was expected that Fidesz would win. The question was, what would be the margin of victory? And it really looked acquired in the last few weeks and days before the elections that Fidesz would not get this 2/3 majority again. And so I think this is what was a huge blow to everyone in the opposition or any citizen who wanted to see that at least a little bit of progress is made against Orbán, even if with all the state institutions on his side, he would still win. And unfortunately, the result has been very disappointing for all these people. So what you have to know is that opposition parties try to coordinate, because that's the big issue. On the one hand, you have a strong party, which is Orbán's party, and on the other hand, you have quite a few opposition parties, most of them from the center or the left, and one from the extreme right. Although when you check the messages of Orbán and the so-called extreme right-wing party, honestly, you don't know which one is more extreme right and which one is less. Especially that the extreme right, so the Jobbik party, has been trying to become a bit more, to appear more central. Anyway, so you have these opposition parties, and the problem is often they end up competing with each other to have the second place, and this is really detrimental when you see how the rules for counting the seats are set up in Hungary. So you have a lot of voting districts. At least in Budapest, you have minimum 4 or 5 voting districts where it is clear that if the opposition, even without the extreme right, would have managed to say, this is our only candidate and we ask everyone to vote for this one, then in those districts, Fidesz would have been beaten. And yeah, they didn't manage to find these accords until the very end, and I think this was really detrimental. And probably, I mean, right now there is a lot of people in the country who are really angry with them for this. So this is more or less the situation. Nevertheless, the rules are extremely challenging for these parties, so we have to also keep that in mind. And it's extremely difficult with so much state propaganda to exist as a party that develops ideas, tries to differentiate from another party. It's really challenging. So yeah, I would say as an introduction, this is more or less the situation now.
Well, perfect. Thank you. I realized that I think I didn't mention the results, and this will also bring me to my next question. So the outcome of the results will, only be official by Saturday, since they still have to count the votes coming from abroad. But it looks like Fidesz has won around 48%. 48% of the votes, and yet you also talked about it at the same time. Newspapers talk about Fidesz having won a supermajority. Can you perhaps explain precisely how that goes? Because obviously not everyone knows the Hungarian voting system in detail.
Yeah, so definitely German audience will be advantaged in this explanation, because we have a system which resembles a little bit. It's just that we have only one chamber in the parliament. So we have one chamber in the parliament. It's composed of 199 members of parliament. Out of this, there are 106 which are elected through local districts. So I have a district, I go to the to vote in that voting district, and there are candidates from each party, and I say, okay, I like Mr. Smith, and I vote for him. So these 106 districts result in 106 elected members of parliament who are elected on an individual basis. And then there is a second vote, which allows 93 new other members of the parliament to be elected. And this is done through a national list. So you have a second vote where you will say, well, I want to support the Socialist Party, or I want to support Fidesz. So technically you could, let's say, in your district because you really like the guy, but on the national level you want to support, I don't know, a liberal party, so you vote for that. And so there are these two votes, and then there is a really complex system of calculating the end result. So I won't get into that, but basically what the Fidesz introduced in 2011 or 12, I think, when they modified the electoral law, was that first of all they switched from two-term election to a one-term election, and they introduced a mechanism which really rewards the party that got the most votes in these districts. So in the end, you can have less than 50% of the people who went to vote for you, but still receive 2/3 of the parliament. I think if we get more into detail, it will just be ununderstandable. Yeah, so this is how it works.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. And the supermajority is crucial to know, because then with that, Fidesz is able to continue changing the constitution like they have been doing for the last couple of years. Also, Marc, you mentioned state propaganda earlier in your first reaction. Perhaps you can kind of explain, for instance, how this works out in your everyday life, or during a visit last weekend back home again. So what kind of posters, or walk us through the advertisements, because I heard already something about that.
Yeah, so at the end of 2014, Orban was in relatively bad shape, electorally speaking. He was just recently re-elected, but by the end of the year, it was really cracking. And so there was the beginning of the so-called migration crisis, and for Orban, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to him. That there was migrants who wanted to go to Germany, Sweden, and the UK, not to Hungary, but who were crossing Hungary. And apart from everything we hear here in Brussels, the way he uses this whole topic to advance his agenda within the European Union, at home, he did everything he could to really incite in people's hearts and minds a fear that the country would be overrun by refugees. So you might have heard about the fence that was constructed at the south of the country, etc., etc. And from then on, there was really a change. From then on, it's really a succession of enemies that the government is always shaping in order to be able to always portraying itself as protecting the country and the nation against the enemy of the moment. And so everything is more or less on the immigration background. But so at the beginning, it was the immigrants themselves. Then at some point, it was Brussels who wanted to push millions of immigrants. Then it was the American billionaire and philanthropist George Soros. Last week, it was the UN. So it's the government always portrays the situation as some people wanting to lure millions of immigrants into the country to somehow culturally colonize the country. And so this is done in the least subtle ways. So with huge billboards everywhere in the city. It started with messages in Hungarian to migrants, like if you come to our country, you have to respect our values, to writing in huge, let's send a big message to Brussels so that they also understand it. Let's stop Brussels, or photos of George Soros. And so the Hungarian citizen sees this in the streets, in the bus stops, in the buses, hears it on radio, sees it on most TVs, in newspapers, etc. all the time, all the time, all the time. And so, of course, if you are the kind of person who tries to read between the lines and are very active on internet, then you can easily find some other sources of information and question this. But the problem is that, especially when you go to the countryside, where most of the former diverse media has been either shut down, bought up, or instrumentalized in a way, people truly believe that Hungary is about to be overrun by millions of migrants who only want to impose their laws and rape women, etc. And I mean, you have reports, camera going to the countryside, asking people, so how do you live? Oh, it's horrible. We don't have a job, and everything is mechanized. The youngsters are leaving. My son left for the UK 2 years ago. I hope he will come back. And say, okay, but who are you going to vote for during the elections? Ah, Orban. And say, but why? It's like, because he's protecting us against the migrants, Brussels, and Soros. So it really works. This is what you have to understand. So the results have to be taken in the prism of this. It's not necessarily that the Hungarians are so xenophobic, but a lot of them hear only this. So after some time, if the radio and the TV and everyone says that, you kind of believe it. So that's the big issue we have.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's quite interesting or extraordinary. You know, usually we expect governments to, well, give honest answers or portray the truth. But to have citizens already being influenced on the street and also mix that with your own electoral message, I think, is a new thing in recent European history. Well, Michal, we've heard now basically, Marc's portrayal of what's been going on the past weekend or the past few weeks, months in Hungary. Can you just explain to us what the reactions were in Poland, in media as well as in civil society?
Well, basically, just on the same day that the election were held, the public TV in Poland published materials with polls from Hungary saying that they will support Fidesz and that it's their party, and that Fidesz is our biggest partner, especially in Polish-Hungarian relations. So this is a very strong pro-Orban stance from the government side. On the other hand, of course, the civic society is outraged about what's happening in Hungary, the same way it's outraged about what's happening in Poland. They see that the situation, although it's not definitely the same because the government in Poland doesn't have a constitutional majority just yet, both governments want to seize power as much as possible, and basically everyone is afraid that what's going to happen in Hungary can happen to Poland too in the following years, because our government is really focusing on having a very great partner in Hungary. So it's not really a very good situation right now, especially after not only for Hungarians who, of course, will not live in a better world, because Orban doesn't really go on a very diverse agenda. He basically, at least what we see from Poland, he ran on anti-refugee, anti-migration agenda, And this is exactly what our government also runs on. It's like, okay, we can accept those people, they don't belong to our culture, and this is not developing your own ideas. This is basically saying that we don't want someone because we believe that they will do harm to our country, which is not true at all.
So, well, thank you for that. I didn't know that the Polish government so clearly took a stance ahead of the elections. I mean, I was generally very aware of different European politicians congratulating, because I think that shows basically who their friends are and what their vision is for Europe and also for this nation state. But especially in this entire play of the different Article 7 procedures with Poland and Hungary, etc., where both of them basically try to make play each other free because there's this veto coming up. I think that's quite interesting. There have been reports by the OSCE about, going back to Hungary now, about voting irregularities. Marc, can you give us some examples or explain to us what the OSCE complained about or noted?
Yeah, so the OSCE, I think they made statements on the fact that the elections were not organized in a way that would allow a fair competition, and I mean this was already the criticism 4 years ago. Although I mean the tone in 4 years has really deteriorated. In the meantime, there have been accounts from a lot of citizens and grassroots organizations, as well as some known experts, about the fact that at least some really strange things seem to have happened during this election. So I think on Sunday morning around 11 or 12, the whole website of the election crashed and was replaced by the much more simple website, but which didn't allow to see data coming in a clear and continuous manner. On top of that, there were some voting districts where the voting finished around 10 or 11 in the evening instead of 7. These were districts which are known to have these problems. Last 4 years ago, they already had these problems, and then so there was some experts who worked in these electoral committees who said that during these 4 hours they don't understand what happened. They had no way of getting in contact with the central electoral committee, that normally they are supposed to physically go to the central electoral committee and oversee when those ones write down the results of their district, and this didn't happen like this time. And then many people saying, so individual citizens who want to check whether there was some irregularities or not, who can, for instance, go and ask to receive statistics from their own, not even voting district, but polling station, so the place where they physically voted. And so they know that they voted for, the Green Party on the national list. But when they receive the statistics, there is 0 votes for the Green Party. So things like this, which are strange, to say the least, they are strange. And so now some opposition parties, and especially many grassroots organizations which were really active during the whole campaign, are now heavily pushing for a recount. Whether this will happen, if it happens, will it happen in a proper way which allows a real recount? This we don't know. We don't know.
All right. Thank you for that. I mean, now that we've kind of sketched what the elections were like and what has happened in Hungary so far, as well as, you know, kind of sketched as well on how the elections have been perceived in Poland, I was wondering, and these two questions go to both of you, what measures do you think should the EU take or should be taken to deal with, you know, possibly Orban's undemocratic behavior? What should the EU national governments do? But also, and that's the second question, slightly more specific, what do you think of the fact that Fidesz is, so that party of Orban, is a member of the European People's Party, so one of the biggest party in the European Parliament? I don't know, Marc, do you want to start?
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I think the EU put in place the Article 7 exactly for situations like this. But the problem is that I think they should have used the Article 7 on Hungary way earlier, because the problem is that once the system is cemented, once the media is being instrumentalized, then attempts from Brussels can very easily be you know, instrumentalized by the government in the domestic arena. So this is always this double-edged sword, you know. Well, in a regime that is, you know, just starting to learn what it means to dismantle checks and balances, etc., this can hurt more. Now I don't know. Now it's really double-edged. I was really worried that some very strong Article 7 things happen before the election, because this would be, for Orban, this would have been perfect. You know, it would have come and confirmed that, you see, Brussels wants to attack us, your government and the people, and we're defending you. And so we can see, I mean, we know that it's not easy to launch an Article 7, and that the experience shows that it's too much tied to political balancing from the Commission's perspective, and also in the Parliament and between the member states. So I think the idea that was submitted already more than a year ago by the Parliament to the Commission to have a systematic review of the fundamental rights, democracy, rule of law, etc., indicators in the countries, in the same way as we do it with economic indicators, systematic, so that it cannot be framed as a political attack, I think would be really the right way to go. But yeah, as we know, enforcing this, putting this in place would also require the consent of the same people who don't want to launch an Article 7 right now. And then, yeah, on the side of the EPP's role, I find it really disgusting what the EPP does. I have to really say it openly. You cannot claim that you're the European People's Party, and in the meantime let one of your members strip its citizens from their rights slowly but surely. And so for me, one of the most outrageous things that I saw in relation to this recently was Joseph Daul, who was, I'm not asking him to campaign against Orban, but at least he doesn't have to tweet that they wish all the best to Fidesz, and that they keep bringing the stability to Hungary and Hungarian people. Because the problem is that when they say things like this, it doesn't reach at all the voters of Fidesz, because those voters, they don't care about what's being said in Brussels, but it reaches those people who are fighting against Fidesz and who still see the EU as a community of values, who could support them, etc. And what they receive is this kind of discourse, and that's extremely disappointing. You don't feel supported.
Just two things. So I'm very happy you mentioned the systematic review. This is also part of one of JEF Europe's resolutions. which we also mentioned in the press release that was published today on the Hungarian elections. So if you're interested precisely on the wording of JEF Europe on the Hungarian elections, do check out. I'm pretty sure we have it tweeted at the moment, or at least during the day. The other thing is a short disclaimer. So with my question comes the fact that JEF is a non-partisan movement. Some of our viewers, some of the JEFers are members of the EPP, or of other parties, or they're not active in parties at all. And that's the lovely thing, that's the wonderful thing of JEF. I mean, at least the executive board has decided that it has, it's time now to, if it crosses the values of the things that we stand for, the values that we agree on in our statutes, etc., then it's time to step up and to voice out. So that's why I raised the question. And with that disclaimer, I give to you, Michal. So 2 questions also to you. So what do you think, what measures should be taken? Think of national government. And then, well, if you also want to comment on the EPP question.
Yes, so I think the thing with Article 7 also goes to Poland, and it's actually a pity that it was triggered so after so much time. It's like they were always saying that you should do something, and I believe that the big problem is not that it was triggered, but that it really took them so much time to actually take some action, which is written inside what was agreed between the EU member states. Also, talking about EPP, I'm not an EPP lover myself. We have, a People's Party in Poland too, which is basically concerned about what people want, not what they want for the country, and actually saying that the EPP didn't do anything against Orban's anti-immigration, anti-human statements actually, and they endorsed him in the same way that did Marine Le Pen or Geert Wilders, who are basically in the far right group, not in the European People's Party. It's really disgusting. I mean, the party is really acting like a nationalist party, not like People's Party. And if European People's Party shows that, being centric party, they support what the Fidesz is doing, then actually you can understand that people are losing trust in the EU, because when the biggest party, which is supposed to be center party, supports nationalist movements, then something's actually really wrong with the union. And according to what can be done to election, I mean, you can always try to check if everything is done correctly, but it's not always very effective. I mean, even with Hungary, you had observers, and they saw that something was not really good and wasn't happening correctly, and it still takes a lot of time to process it and then confirm that nothing was falsified, and then you still don't have 100%. You are not 100% sure that what you were presented were like actual results or what actually happened. So basically, action should be taken, but at the very earliest stages, not now. I also agree that triggering Article 7 against Hungary would be like giving more power to Orban, which is okay. The European Union that doesn't like us, they want to get rid of us. They want to punish us for being Hungarians. So action has to be taken, but not too late.
Well, thanks for that. But okay, so we've covered governments, we've covered a party, where we hope, that they find back to their values and also take courageous political decisions. But what do you think can pro-European NGOs like ours, like our friends, basically do still in Hungary? And then, Michal, if you answer, please do so for Poland, because I mean, we also react whenever something is happening to you. Marc, you want to start?
Me, okay.
Yeah,
so the question, I'm sorry, because there was a little bit of lagging. So the question is, what could European NGOs such as JEF do to help Hungarians?
Yes. Yes. So what can pro-European NGOs do? What do you want them to do?
That's a good question. No, I think one thing we need to do is to keep keep the acting as a spotlight on these parties here in Brussels. And by the way, I fully agree, and we often cite EPP with Orban, but I mean, in other party groups, there are also some I find not very frequentable party members, and those other groups also don't excel at denouncing their own members. So I think we have to put these groups against their own contradictions, because if we don't do it, then no one does it. So that's for the activism in Brussels. I think for when it goes towards the member states, the first thing that I always hear is really the showing solidarity. So that in the middle of the struggle, these organizations know that others are looking towards them, and that they sympathize, and that they don't forget them. I think it seems stupid, but this actually means a lot. It means really a lot. And then I think one thing that an organization like JEF can do is these kind of exchanges like we're doing right now, Hangouts, but all kinds of other things where we share experience. Because as we can see that these populists, they learn from each other's playbooks, and sometimes I think we could also learn, civil society could also learn from each other's playbooks as how to resist these narratives. And I think we're not so bad at doing it, but we could probably still do better.
So what can we do on the ground? I mean, can you give me one specific example of resisting in Hungary?
Yeah, it's not so easy. I think there's what I heard from quite a few organizations is that you can organize some event in the country where this then really shows that we are much more connected than you think. You can't just stigmatize us like this. And that this helps a lot as well. Yeah, and then I think, for instance, one thing that can be done is that you can have these actions, where the different national branches of JEF all send a letter to the Hungarian embassy in their country, or things like this, so to multiply the messages. These are that help a lot. But I have to say, we are often confronted. I mean, I work in the NGO sector here in Brussels, and we're often confronted when we ask Hungarians, how can we help you? It's not so easy to find how we can help, because often the help is they're afraid that the help can be instrumentalized. But yeah, I mean, this is always the question. The same as with Article 7.
Right. I mean, Michal, are you inspired? Do you think there are some specific examples that Polish activists like yourself can take from Hungarian activists, Hungarian resistors? And what do you think, how can you support each other?
Well, basically, the Hungarians are facing a very huge problem with Orban, so they have to have a lot of courage to come by the problem and get rid of it. So we can certainly take it from them, the amount of work they do on the ground to try to change the situation, even when the parties are not they are not working together to achieve the common goal of getting rid of the ruling party. The people are starting campaigns to vote strategically, to do something to change the situation, and it is really heartwarming when you see that people want change, that they are not really happy with what's happening. And regarding your earlier question, what can the pro-European organizations do? Basically, it's $1 million question. I mean, if we knew what the pro-European organization could do, we would probably do that. But certainly, what was always omitted in the happy pro-European, not pro-European, but happy European family of states was that there was not enough pressure put on education in Europe. And by education, I don't mean teaching. You can teach people about institutions, but they have to actually understand how it all not only works, but how it impacts their life, where they are placed in the whole structure. People don't believe that European elections can make any change. Actually, JEF can promote, going to the polls and saying let's vote for Europe, let's vote and show that we are more democratic than the national elections, which go about 40-50%, which have usually about 40-50% or of the people coming who are eligible to vote, not of the whole population. So basically, half of the population resigns from their right to vote. These are the measures that should have been taken a lot of time ago, before we started going through all the crisis. But we should certainly take them now to get over it and start doing things right again, and start telling people what world they actually live in. It's like same thing also went with Brexit. People were promised something that they didn't even knew how the world works, how the economics work, how you forge international relations. These are basic things to understand when you are presented with the choice to vote on the future of your country. It's really important to educate people. I mean, I know that I'm always boring and saying let's educate, but it's really a very important part, to have enough knowledge to actually understand, because I think that even some people in the pure European circles don't know what actually is written in the European treaties, which is actually really strange, because it's very, very important things for the whole European project. It's basic people are not educated enough and it's really important to change that, to say them, you have to get involved yourself. We can't always be involved for you.
Yeah, maybe can I add something?
Yeah.
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah. So we had already two instances: civil society, and when I say civil society, it's organized NGOs, but also really grassroots. Are learning tools to try and change the situation. So we had a referendum about how to handle the migrant crisis in Hungary, which is a really populist one, also at the end of 2016, and it was really difficult to see how you could reject the referendum without going to vote at the referendum and vote what was opposing the government, because by doing that you were contributing to the participation rate, and if the participation rate was higher than 50%, then the referendum was valid. So there was a whole question of how to do this, and it's really grassroots organizations and citizens who, through social media, progressively brought in the idea of we actually have to vote invalidly, which means that you cross the yes and the no together, because it clearly shows I went there and I tell you I don't accept this question. And this was a really citizen campaign. It was not the opposition. The opposition was completely trapped. And here at these elections as well, this was what was bringing a lot of hope, is that something similar actually started developing. Yeah, what you have to say about the elections, the referendum, is that in the end there was 8 to 9% of votes which were invalid, which is substantial. So this is why there was hope this time, because in the same way, it's really NGOs and grassroots organizations that started developing messages which were proposing to the voter a strategy, which was in the individual district, you have to vote for the candidate who has the biggest chance against the opposition. And on the national list, you can vote. You vote for your favorite opposition party, and this is also something which is really not clear just 2 months ago, and it was really developed by civil society and not by the opposition. The opposition actually more like screwed it up a little bit because they were not allowed. They were not capable of saying, okay, you have more chances in this district, so I retract. So we're slowly learning, even within the confined space that a regime like this offers you, and it's a regime that still needs to keep the facade, so they cannot, throw you in jail and come up with the tanks and whatever. So you, even in this confined space, civil society and grassroots organizations sooner or later find a way to try to hack it. So it didn't work this time, and many people hope that maybe it will work at the European elections a little bit. And this was also part of the big disappointment on Sunday, because many people are hoping that these actions had managed to erode the system a little bit, but it seems like it wasn't the case. And so the main message this time was go vote. Whatever you want to vote, go vote. You cannot complain once the elections are over if you don't go vote. So it's part of this citizen education efforts, but done by grassroots organizations and civil society.
Okay, now I hope my microphone is on. Perfect. No, thank you very much both for the heartfelt plädoyer, in the end also for citizenship education. I think this is a part that's always been forgotten, that the democracies, or that many democracies in you are still quite young. They're as old as I am, and you don't get democracy basically when you snap like that. But you need people to understand that they need to go vote, that they need to be, members of a party, for instance. They should, can get elected themselves as well. It's not someone else doing it for you. But if you're really annoyed with something, you can do something. Just for everyone who's watching, there is a chat function. Let me do the typical YouTube thing of something there. You can also engage with Twitter hashtag, which is hashtag JEF Hangout, to ask your questions, because we still have like 50 minutes or slightly more to go if you have a couple of questions, and we'd be delighted to hear about that. Let's see. So we discussed citizenship education. Is there citizenship education, also grassroots activism, used the wonderful term of hacking democracy, basically? Very specific to JEF, and I'm interested in that as vice president of JEF Europe. We have this campaign called Democracy Under Pressure, and clearly Hungary and Poland both were a focus of this campaign in this year when it happened back in March. What do you think JEF Europe can do? So you mentioned basically showing solidarity, but is there something else we can do, how we can connect to the ground? Because my personal feeling is always when I hear about this No Soros bill, I'm slightly worried that people perceive us as, oh, those Europeans who implement things in Hungary, but I do believe that there are Hungarians that want to engage in JEF. So what can we do as an entire network? So not only JEF Europe, but the different national sections. Do you have like one particular idea that I can note down?
Well, if I was living in Hungary, I would be working extremely hard on creating a really active and flourishing JEF Hungary section. But I'm not living in Hungary, so it's a bit difficult like that. But yeah, I mean, I think if we could try to gather a bunch of people Hungarians who could start building up a more longer term JEF Hungary, because as far as I understand, it sometimes exists and sometimes disappears, right? It could be a step, no?
It's just to clarify, it exists. It's just sometimes more and sometimes less active. I think those are
yeah.
Okay. I don't know, Michal, do you have any idea what we can do as JEF Europe? I mean, do you have any specific wishes as JEF Poland president, for instance, for your country?
Well, I believe that we should promote ourselves more. I mean, do sponsored marketing, do things like, for example, now Volt does. You get sponsored content everywhere in Facebook. It's basically people have to know that JEF is somewhere there, because I believe that there are many pro-European polls, and it's just a niche that is not used enough. They are not being targeted well enough. It's all the parties in the parliament. They always say that they are maybe a bit pro-Europe, but not that much. We have to have a little bit of sovereignty, etc. And they are a bit cherry-picking too in their agendas. We are pro-Euro, anti-something, pro-something, anti-Europe. And the problem is that we don't have this very much pro-European approach in Poland. So basically, JEF has to step in and say, yeah, we are pro-European and we are an alternative to standard politics and to what you know from daily life and the elections that are held, every several years, depending on what type of election it is. So, yeah, basically to promote ourselves more.
That sounds very good. So, if you happen to be a young European living in Hungary, in Poland, but also other countries, I mean, obviously Poland, you can contact Michal. But if you send an email to info@jef.eu, we're also very happy to connect you with our people on the ground to make sure that there's, as many people as possible working to promote a more democratic Europe. Well, I still have some questions on this notion of illiberal democracy, because this is also something that always comes up when you discuss Hungary, right? Because this is, I mean, Viktor Orban made this a very popular term, unfortunately, when he confirmed several times that he wants to establish a liberal democracy in Hungary, which is quite unusual for a member state of the EU. Just to kind of finish on that ground, Marc, do you have specific policies or policy elements that you've witnessed where you think, okay, this is clearly a liberal democracy?
Yeah, so even in this, Orban got lucky because he actually used the term illiberal state, and then somehow it turned into a liberal democracy. So yeah, I mean, the illiberal democracy or the illiberal regime, yeah, it has some elements which don't trump you, you know, like I think one important aspect is always to keep the democratic facade. So you slowly, and I think Orban has become a master of this, of slowly emptying checks and balances of their substance. So it's not that he completely closed the constitutional court. It's just that he, you know, slightly modified their functioning, and actually did this every time they were in his way. And so with many state institutions, you have this whole game of slowly, yeah, emptying them from the substance, having a little quarrel with Brussels, so you step back 2 steps, but you know that you will advance another 3 steps later, etc. And so it's this process which is definitely part of it. The simultaneous modification of the constitutional court, the judiciary, the media law is already, I think, a sign that something is really not going well. But the problem, I think, also is that at least in the Hungarian case, in other cases I don't know them well enough, these reforms gradually diverted, I would say, the focus of the government itself from governing, because so okay, we heard about all the corruption scandals that we have in Hungary, so that's clearly one thing that the government is very good at, is to find very creative ways of using public money. But the thing is that education and the health system, etc., are really clearly, slowly going down the drain. And people are not stupid; they kind of do realize this. And this is why you need propaganda, because in order to maintain such a regime, you need to keep people mobilized, and you need to have a kind of permanent campaigning ongoing, where you allow a certain space for the opposition to exist, because it also legitimizes you. It also allows to tell Brussels, like, hey, don't exaggerate. Not everything is so bad here. But you can regularly kind of defeat this opposition by overwhelming it with propaganda and with referenda, etc., etc. So it keeps giving the impression that in our system, the nation is with us. There are some who don't yet understand, but soon they will understand as well. And so you keep demonstrating the unity of the nation behind the government all the time. So I think that's the other important ingredient of this kind of illiberal state.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's hard to hear, you know. That's why I'm sort of looking towards Michal, when listening to Marc sort of describing the illiberal states, illiberal democracy. Do you think this is some sort of role model for Poland or the Polish government? So should we see Poland as, you know, Hungary's illiberals' younger brother?
Well, the main difference, I think, is that Poland still hasn't changed the the electoral districts. So basically, they were voted for on the same basis that the previous governments were, and we call it. I think it was even called a totalitarian democracy as a term, where you have a democratic process which wasn't changed in any way since for several elections now, and in such process one party emerges and creates a structure where they dominate and can promote their own ideas without caring about all the other parties and all the other people, all the other groups of voters. So basically, that's what they are doing. I mean, I think that Orban is like going on mostly on his anti-immigrant agenda and getting rid of opponents, but this is also doing it. They're undermining the opposition, saying that the opposition is crooked, that they are biased, and they are paid for by even if not by Soros, then by some parties outside of Poland, that the EU is opponent of Poland, and that the opposition is supported by the EU, etc. So creating this chain of things that are supposed to sound bad for people, while they were sounding good, because opposition was something that was opposed to the government, but they were still legitimate. But now opposition is being treated like people who committed treason, people who who are against the state, and the ruling party is the state, etc. But it's still theoretically democratic. I mean, theoretically, because they can still be voted out. It's not like you have only one party and you don't have any alternative. But they are promoting themselves as a right party, while they they actually took some ideas from the leftist parties. They took social programs. They the most right wing thing about them is that they support the church, that they are going along with religion. But if it's the definition of right wing, then many parties in Poland, like mostly right, apart from the socialists. So this is this problem of creating this image that people are most people possible would support. So all the possible opponents would only double what you are proposing, or you would double what they are proposing to undermine them, which is a very bad situation, because you go on some agenda, then you get rid of parts of it because they are you can't accomplish them because it's too much money, etc. But then you focus on what you actually wanted to do, but the opposition is already crushed. They theoretically can go into government once more, but it would be like really hard, especially that now the government has the power. The one party has over 50% of the seats in the lower house, which is same, and they can basically force anything they want, and they are even playing it in a way that opposition can't actually oppose them without being treated as treasoners, people who go hand in hand with communism. Especially one of the laws that were passed lately, like almost passed. I think the president stopped it. Was about degrading people who were generals during communist times of Poland. So basically, I mean, if you are anti-communist, then you would generally be pro it, and then you say that okay, so opposition says the same thing that we does, so there's no opposition, right? And if they say that there was someone who theoretically was in the military service, or was working in some military institutions, but military-related institutions, but not in the army. And he's also, being punished for, daily work during hard times. Then you can be called a communist and enemy of the state. So this is a very dangerous agenda, very dangerous way of handling things illiberally. But then you can't. I mean, this is still not one-party state theoretically.
That is a very sad notion to end on. It's true. So thank you for the explanation. That basically the framework, the political framework in Hungary is changed that much that it's well, definitely on its road, if not to become an illiberal state. Whereas in Poland you still have the framework and you could basically play around with that. But I think both cases show us that it's important for us who are active in civil society, no matter where we are in Europe, to show solidarity with our friends in Europe. One last question, but before I do that, quick reminder to those watching it. This is your last opportunity to ask a question. I'm sure these wonderful two gentlemen will also answer your questions whenever, but feel free to do so in public. So you can ask in the YouTube chat right next to us, but you can also do that under the hashtag JEF Hangout. So as my last possible question, I was wondering, I mean, the political situation in both countries look dark. I mentioned in the beginning a very large newspaper announcing that then it's going to close immediately in Hungary, for instance. And also Poland is not completely free of the Article 7 procedure to some degree. And sort of what the rest, or what a lot of Europeans currently think of is the European parliamentary elections next year. And obviously Brexit. But to what extent do you think national politics will play a role in those elections, at least for those two countries? So do you think usually European elections are seen as a second order election where people are going to react to national politics on European elections? Do you think this is going to happen as well? Will we see a bigger increase of votes for anti-European votes, anti-democratic votes?
In a way, ironically, in Hungary, the EU elections might be a lot about the EU because we need to stop it and we need to change its course and yeah. So I think, I mean, really, these elections we just had now, the Fidesz won them with no program at all. The only program is stop the migrants. So we truly have no idea what's coming. But as I would see it, in a year from now, we'll be probably campaigning. We will not be campaigning against for exiting the EU or something like this. This I would be extremely surprised. But campaigning for making for pushing the EU more towards nations cooperating than towards a more heavily integrated continent. So yeah, ironically, it will be a lot about Europe. How the opposition will react? Will they try to do an anti-Orban campaign, or try to explain more what Europe can do? This I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I really don't know. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, you did.
Okay,
what about Poland, Michal?
Yeah, in Poland, the European elections are usually, as you said, the reflection of the national vote, because the same parties start. People don't really know much about the candidates. They basically have the, like in parliamentary elections, they support the party, not the individual members, or they support the leaders of the parties. So when they are faced with the choice between, you know, their favorite party and someone else, even even not connected with any party, starting as independent, they will most probably go for their favorite party in the national parliamentary elections, because that's what they believe that is best for them and best for Europe. Because if they agree with what the parties think about what their country should look like, then maybe most probably the party also has a vision of how the country should work within the European Union, or they basically don't care how it works within the European Union. They just want their favorite party members to be elected. So it's like this.
All right. Well, actually, two different images, but it's very interesting to hear that European elections might be about Europe to some degree in Hungary. Well, with that, I think we finished this round. I thank you very much, Marc and Michal, for your time, but also for your dedication to the topic. I hope that you find the strength basically in the next period to continue being awesome activists. I know we're very proud of both of you in the JEF network. So this is what we do. We fight for a democratic Europe and are always open for other people to join us as well. I also want to thank Katarina, who's been behind the scenes all the time, arranging all technical stuff, but also Gesine from Treffpunkt Europa, who has been wonderful in preparing this meeting content-wise. And with that, I think we say good night, Europe. And we'll talk to you the next time. Bye.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Bye, thank you.
Bye.